Daniel Sports Central, big over a college football game preview and prediction on the Week 3 matchup between the Oklahoma Sooners and the Nebraska Cornhuskers. Huge matchup for both these teams coming up here in Week 3. You got Oklahoma's widely thought of to be one of the top teams in the country, going on the road for the first time this season, taking on Nebraska, a team that just fired their head coach, and they're 1-2 to start off the season. So obviously an extremely disappointing start to the season for Nebraska, taking on an Oklahoma team that you could say has had a great start to the season. So definitely a very different dynamic for both these teams as we head into Week 3. But we'll be going over a full game preview and prediction on this matchup here today. Starting out with your team trends, Oklahoma beat Kent State 33-3 in their Week 2 matchup. So overall, it was a good win, dominant win, only allowing Kent State to score 3. They're 2-0 heading into this matchup, also ranked 6th in the AP poll for Week 3. So the Sooners are considered a top 6 team according to the AP poll right now. As for Nebraska, very disappointing loss to Georgia Southern, 42-45. Georgia Southern, of course, the Sun Belt had an excellent Week 2, several major upsets, but Georgia Southern, that may have been the worst upset of the three there. With Georgia Southern, that's a team that went 3-9 last season. They were a terrible football team last season, and for them to come into Lincoln and steal a win off Nebraska, 42-45, just a brutal loss for Nebraska there. And you can kind of, Georgia Southern, we'll see how they do this season. Potentially they will be one of the top teams in the Sun Belt, but based on last season, their 3-9 season, new head coach, that was definitely a very disappointing loss there for the Cornhuskers. And there's definitely some reason to believe why Scott Frost was fired after that loss. Even though the fan base is pretty split right now between whether or not Scott Frost should have been fired then or after October 1st when the buyout got cut, or even maybe later on, maybe at the end of the season. But in the end, it's happened, it's over with, and Mickey Joseph is the interim head coach for Nebraska. So they are 1-2. Nebraska also lost to Northwestern in Week 0. So that wasn't the only disappointing loss of the season last week. Games will be on Saturday, September 17th in Lincoln. Nebraska is the home team for this one, and it is kickoff at 11 a.m. Central on big noon kickoff. So it's on a pretty big stage for this matchup here between Nebraska and Oklahoma. Spread's going OU by 11, over under 66, and FPI is also going OU here, 75.3%. So Sooners are favored by a decent amount in this matchup, not terribly much. But there's no doubt that the Sooners are favored. Series history, Oklahoma leads at 46-38. Of course, this is a matchup that's had a very long, storied history. This goes way back, the Big 12, Big 8. This is a matchup with a lot of history in it. Oklahoma leads it overall, though, 46-38. They won the past 2 matchups. The last game was in 2021 in Norman when the Sooners won it by a pretty close margin. It was a pretty close game last year overall. Stat comparison for this matchup, these are your 2022 stats. Oklahoma, 39 points a game, 8 allowed, 264 pass yards a game, 196 rush yards, and then for yards allowed, 209 for passing, 96 for rushing. And as for Nebraska, 36 points per game, 31 points allowed in their first 3 games, which is definitely something that needs to be fixed. Offensively, Nebraska hasn't been terrible, but their defense has just been just terrible so far this season. It's honestly the polar opposite that we saw out of Nebraska last season. The defense was really good for Nebraska last season, and the offense was just was definitely pretty poor last year. But for Oklahoma, both sides of the ball pretty strong. Offensively, really strong. Defensively, they've been pretty impressive so far this season as well. But then for Nebraska, 288 pass yards a game, 203 rush yards, and then for yards allowed, 284 passing, 207 for rushing. So that's a lot of rush yards allowed per game so far this season there, especially with 207 there for the Cornhuskers. Here are your recent matchups. The first 2 matchups for Oklahoma, the first 3 for Nebraska so far this season. OU also beat UTEP 45-13 in Week 1. Nebraska beat North Dakota 38-17 on September 3rd and lost to Northwestern in Week 0 28-31. Some key points for this one. Oklahoma 2-0. Sooners have been impressive so far, both sides of the ball. Dylan Gabriel, of course, the UCF transfer quarterback. He's been impressive so far. He hasn't thrown an interception in his first 2 games. He's got 529 yards, 5 touchdowns. Not a bad start to the season for him. Of course, also Eric Gray at the running back position has been the top rusher. So, offensively, the Sooners have got tremendous potential. Even defensively, I've been pretty impressed with this team so far. They got something to prove here, though. This is the first road game of the season for the Sooners, and this is a team that's ranked number 6. They have yet to really prove that they're a top 10 team, and this is the first matchup where they can start to do that, going up against another Power 5 opponent. Where they've dominated their first 2 games against UTEP and Kent State, but this is the first matchup against, you could say, a more major opponent, obviously being in the Power 5 with Nebraska here. For the Cornhuskers, Scott Frost obviously fired this week, a big storyline. Mickey Joseph is the new head coach. Of course, he was the former LSU receiving coach for the receivers, and he's in Nebraska now, and he's got a chance to prove himself as a head coach. So we'll see how that goes. Anthony Grant, he is emerging as a really huge impact player for the Cornhuskers. He's already put up over 400 yards on the season, 5 touchdowns. So, Anthony Grant really is a key player to watch out for in this game here. And defensively, though, for the Cornhuskers, obviously, got to be better. This team on defense, you got to play a lot better, especially when you're going up. You played Georgia Southern and allowed 45 points to them. And Georgia Southern is a team that I can guarantee you isn't that good on offense, especially in comparison to what Nebraska is on defense, or they should be on defense. So for Oklahoma here, an offense that has got tremendous talent, the Cornhuskers really got to play well here if they want, especially on defense, if they want any chance of pulling off what would be just a massive upset here. They also have the home field advantage. Nebraska's got a pretty decent home field advantage, and of course they've still got that just terrible streak going of 1-score losses. This team has played they've had a lot of close games in the past year, and almost all of their losses have been extremely close. Even the 2 losses that they've had this season were within 1 score. In fact, both games were within a field goal. They lost to Northwestern by 3, lost to Georgia Southern by 3. So obviously a very intriguing matchup. 2 very different dynamics for both these teams heading into week 3. Let's get to the prediction here for OU and Nebraska coming up here in week 3. I'm going Oklahoma here, 34-27. No doubt the Sooners, I'm going to pick them here, but I do think it's a bit closer than expected. I think having Mickey Joseph as the head coach for Nebraska, I think that's going to bring some new life to this team. And I may be a bit too optimistic for this game, but I do think Nebraska keeps it fairly close. I think, Nebraska in the past year, this is a talented football team. They're better than the record shows, I think, for sure. And of course, it's just those close losses, and that's why Scott Frost is gone, is because he couldn't win those close games. And so for Nebraska here, being a team that's got, obviously, I think, tremendous potential, I think they'll keep it close, and it's going to be yet another 1-score loss. But, this is a team that definitely, I think, they can still have a good season. Cornhuskers can still have a good season here. They can turn things around definitely in the conference, but in the conference schedule. But for Nebraska here, I just don't see it happening. I think especially after just a tough week. There's a chance, but I do think that I'm pretty comfortable picking the Sooners here, especially with Oklahoma being a pretty strong team defensively. I wouldn't be surprised if Oklahoma scored upwards of 40 here. Honestly, I almost predicted a 41-27. Just because Nebraska's defense has been fairly poor so far this season. But in the end, I do want to predict Oklahoma 60%, over under 66. I'll take the under for this game, and Nebraska to cover in the end what is an 11-point spread towards Oklahoma right now. But let me know your thoughts and comments below on this game, and I appreciate you guys watching as always. Stay tuned for more from All Sports Central. Catch you on the next one.